The movie starts with Lydia Dietz filming an episode of her paranormal talk show, Ghost House, where she interviews people who believe their houses are haunted and ask her to investigate since she can see ghosts. During one episode, Lydia gets scared when she thinks she sees Beetlejuice sitting in the audience. After the show, she talks to her boyfriend and manager, Rory. Lydia tries to take some pills to calm herself, but Rory throws the pills away. Then, Lydia gets a lot of messages and calls from her stepmother, Delia, who is panicking over some terrible news. Lydia visits her stepmother, Delia, at her art gallery, as Delia has become a famous artist. Delia tells Lydia that her father, Charles, has died. He survived a plane crash into the ocean, but was later eaten by a shark. They start making plans to go back to Winter River for Charles's funeral. Meanwhile, a ghost janitor accidentally brings back a woman named Dolores, who pieces herself together and staples her body parts back in place. Once whole, she grabs the janitor and demands to know where Beetlejuice is. When he doesn't answer, she sucks out his soul, leaving him as just an empty skin. Lydia and Delia go to Astrid's school to find Lydia's daughter. Astrid is often teased at school for being different and has a tense relationship with her mother, feeling that Lydia spends more time focused on ghosts than on her. When they arrive at the school, Delia dramatically announces Charles's death to Astrid. Shocked by the news of her grandfather's passing, Astrid gets into an argument with Lydia, upset that they never fully talked about her own father, Richard, who had died in a river in South America. Meanwhile, in the afterlife, Beetlejuice is summoned by Wolf Jackson, a ghost detective, who confronts him about the reappearance of Dolores. This makes Beetlejuice nervous. He explains that when he was alive, Dolores was his wife, whom he met while working as a grave robber. After their marriage, Dolores tricked him into drinking poison because she was the leader of a soul-sucking cult. Before dying, Beetlejuice chopped her into pieces, and now he knows she's seeking revenge. The Dietz women arrive in town and stay at Lydia's old home on the hill. After the funeral, Rory takes advantage of the moment to propose to Lydia in front of everyone, even though she clearly doesn't want to accept, and Astrid openly shows her dislike for Rory. Reluctantly, Lydia agrees to the proposal. Frustrated, Astrid decides to go for a bike ride around town. During her ride, she crashes through a fence and hits a tree, where she discovers a boy named Jeremy Fraser in his treehouse. They sit together for a moment, and Astrid shares her feelings about having Lydia as her mom. Beetlejuice finds out Lydia is returning to Winter River. He sees this as his chance to escape. Later, Astrid goes into the attic of the house, where she finds an old model of the town and a pamphlet that tricks her into saying Beetlejuice name. Lydia catches her just in time to stop her from saying it. However, when Rory finds Astrid, he tries to help Lydia by using his fake New Age methods, and he ends up saying Beetlejuice name 3 times. This causes both him and Lydia to be sent into the town model, where Lydia comes face to face with the trickster demon again. Beetlejuice also frightens Rory by making his nightmare face before Lydia manages to send them both back home. Astrid visits Jeremy's house, where she discovers that he has a copy of the Handbook for the Recently Deceased, which he claims to have gotten at a yard sale in town. They make plans to hang out at his place on Halloween night. Hours before the wedding, Astrid asks Lydia to drive her to Jeremy's house for their get-together. Once they go upstairs to his room, Jeremy charms Astrid, and they share a kiss, only to suddenly find themselves floating. Jeremy then reveals that he is a ghost who died after falling from the treehouse. He asks Astrid for her help in coming back to life, promising her that she will be able to see her father again. Meanwhile, Lydia is speaking with a real estate agent who is planning to sell Jeremy's house. The agent informs her that the house has been difficult to sell because it's known as a murder house. She explains that Jeremy killed his parents 23 years ago and fell from the treehouse to his death before the police could arrest him. Realizing that Astrid is in danger, Lydia rushes back to Jeremy's house. Jeremy has Astrid recite a spell from the handbook, which opens a gateway to the afterlife. Just as Lydia arrives, she realizes that Astrid has already gone through the portal with Jeremy. With no alternatives, a frantic Lydia heads back to the house and summons Beetlejuice for assistance. He is ecstatic to have the love of his afterlife returning for him, but when Lydia explains that she requires his help to rescue Astrid, Beetlejuice consents, but only if Lydia agrees to marry him so he can escape Dolores. Lydia consents to his terms. Beetlejuice then creates a passage to the afterlife and instructs one of the shrunken head guys, named Bob, to assume his position in case anyone comes searching for him. Meanwhile, in the backyard, Delia is performing a ceremony to pay tribute to Charles, using two asps that she thinks are defanged. Unfortunately, she soon realizes her mistake when both snakes bite her in the neck, resulting in her collapsing and dying. Jeremy discloses his real motives to Astrid, revealing that he deceived her into agreeing to sacrifice her life for his own. He leaves her to board the Soul Train while he goes to get his ticket validated, but Richard spots Astrid and chases after her. Dolores continues her afterlife rampage after draining another ghost's soul. She arrives at Beetlejuice's apartment, but discovers it is empty and devoid of life. Astrid, held hostage, is being taken to a train to deport her in afterlife, but Lydia spots her at time. They try to make an escape and accidentally fall into a desert. Turns out desert have sandworm in it who are eager to eat them. They run and a hand save them. Turns out it's Richard, Astrid's late father. Lydia and Astrid reconnect with Richard and share a brief moment of camaraderie before they rush to prevent Jeremy from having his pass validated. Jackson is questioning Bob, who was disguised as Beetlejuice. Delia finds herself in the afterlife's waiting area, unable to comprehend that she is no longer alive. She resorts to summoning Beetlejuice to help her return, which he eagerly agrees to do. Once Jackson exits the room, Dolores finds Bob and extracts his soul as well. They arrive at the window, realizing they may be too late. It turns out that the ghost who stamped the pass was Beetlejuice, and the stamp reads, "Shit out of luck." Beetlejuice then pulls a lever to a trapdoor that sends Jeremy plummeting down to hell. After bidding farewell to Richard, Lydia and Astrid head back to the living world, where Astrid expresses her remorse to Lydia for her previous behavior. They suddenly recall that the wedding is taking place at that very moment, prompting Lydia to decide to go through with it. Beetlejuice appears with Delia to disrupt the ceremony. He injects Rory with a truth serum, compelling him to admit that he always thought Lydia's paranormal abilities were nonsense and that he was only marrying her for her wealth. Beetlejuice hands Lydia a glove, allowing her to punch Rory across the room. Beetlejuice then attempts to finalize his wedding with Lydia by trapping the other guests inside their phones and distorting their faces. He launches into an extravagant musical performance, even causing Jackson and his ghost officers to freeze in their tracks. However, Dolores arrives to interrupt the festivities. Astrid seizes the handbook and searches for a loophole, seeking a way to summon assistance. She sketches a door on the floor that leads to Saturn's moon, bringing forth the sandworm once more. Beetlejuice narrowly avoids being devoured again by steering the sandworm toward Rory and Dolores, making them its next meal. Just before Beetlejuice can complete the wedding ceremony, Astrid discovers a loophole stating that the contract Beetlejuice compelled Lydia to sign for their marriage is invalid because he brought Lydia into the afterlife while she was still alive. Lydia utters his name 3 times, causing him to inflate like a balloon before bursting. Jackson regains movement and informs the ladies that he must escort Delia back to the afterlife. Delia says her goodbyes to Lydia and Astrid, but vows to haunt them until she feels ready to move on, and they express their affection for Delia. In the afterlife, Delia is reunited with Charles and the remaining parts of his body that were not consumed. Later, Lydia records one final episode of Ghost House to retire and spend more time with Astrid. The two arrange a flight to Transylvania, where Astrid seems drawn to a boy dressed as Dracula. The scene shifts to their wedding, followed by Astrid giving birth, only for her to deliver a grotesque Beetlejuice baby that attacks the doctors. Lydia awakens, realizing this was just a nightmare, but she hears and sees Beetlejuice beside her. She wakes from this second nightmare as well, indicating that she has not entirely escaped him yet.